for asking me.
Yes, sorry, I meant to mention Gary as thanks for the intermediary. Yes, well done.
And thank you to my colleague Tom, who I'm going to lean on quite a bit in a minute, as I do every day. Tom's newly appointed as commercial director of Diamond Bus Northwest and Preston Bus Limited. And he's grown in the business over a number of years, probably 8 years since it was came to us as a graduate, and he's worked his way up and worked in all aspects of the job, whether it's operational, commercial, he's done driving, and he worked alongside John Asquith a lot, who maybe some of you know from Preston Bus in years gone by. So Tom's been instrumental in leading a team really to put together the franchising bids, and we will be touching on franchising. So so just bear with me a minute or two. So are we having the slides up, Tom, please? He's in charge of the movie actually, so I need to just prod him a bit. I was going to tie a piece of string to him, but I didn't find a piece long enough to get to him. It's down the other end of the office.
So I'm still having problems sharing my screen, unfortunately. Don't know whether anybody can help with that.
Allow participant to share screen has been pressed at this end. That should be okay. As Brendan advised us earlier, I've released
my screen also says you've got us disabled. So I don't know. What do you want me to go? Just talk through the slides without showing them? What do you want me to do, Jeff? Yeah. Let
me try again. Allow participants to share screen. Anything at your end?
Yes. Bear with me.
Do we have lift off?
Okay.
You're in. Well done.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so there's obviously me. I've been around a day or two, and Thomas has been around not quite so long, but we work together closely every day. So next one, Tom, please. Okay, so what I'm going to do is talk a little about the background in the Northwest. I'm not going to talk about Rotala, and if you want to talk about Dunn one night, we can do that because that's a whole lifetime or probably 2 lifetimes work in itself. But we'll talk about the Northwest of Rotala, how we came to enter the Manchester market, the route or the journey we've taken from well, what is it now? 7 years, 8 years almost. It is just over 8 years, actually. The announcement of franchising during 2020. And then I'm going to hand over to Thomas. He's going to talk through the tender process and the work that's been involved. And we can talk about the learning experience as much as anything, because although I've been around a long time doing this job, I've never really been involved with franchising to the extent that we've been involved in Manchester. Talk about the outcome of the first tranche and how it worked for us or didn't work, but it will work eventually. And some of the work that's involved now with the demobilisation of our current business and the mobilisation of the 7, we'll say, new businesses or new franchises we've got to put together that works as one. And the future opportunities. So thanks, Tom. So just a little bit about our entry into Preston. 26th of January 11, we bought Preston Bus. It was a well publicised story with Stagecoach and the monopolist people. And eventually we was the preferred bidder. When we went into Preston, we got a business that was loss making at the beginning. But it had some real strengths, and really from day one, I've been the MD of that business. Strategy was based on building from the strengths, which is always a good starting point. And the culture in the business was probably frustrating, but it was a strength because there was a lot of long-serving staff, a lot of people that believed in doing the job the right way. And it was important that we embrace that, but didn't actually let that hinder progress. But progress was slow in terms of changing procedures, etc. But that's something we accepted. Got a good, well-established network although Stagecoach nicked out of it. I think it was the 11 service at that time, which we could have done with really, and there was a lot of things happening at that time. Lancashire County Council took out all the on-street passenger information, and there was they took out I think it was about £300,000 worth of subsidy on the famous Orbit services. So we had some challenges there. But one thing we learned, or I learned very quickly, there was a lot of loyalty to the business in terms of the customers, because previously it was local authority owned, it was workers cooperative in effect, then it was Stagecoach, and then it was obviously ourselves. A lot of loyalty to the brand, and that is the main reason we've always kept the brand, whereas in other places we've gone to Bristol or Birmingham, and Birmingham was Diamond Bus, or we've come to Manchester and we've used the brand Diamond Bus. So the strategy was also about generating more revenue. I say finances weren't as good as they needed to be. We won contracts operating out of Preston as well as within. That was something that was relatively new to the business at that time. Commercial vehicle repair and maintenance department contributed a lot in terms of revenue to the business, quality revenue. That was basically the major part of that work was a contract with Preston City Council to maintain, I think it's 39 bin lorries, but over 100 vehicles in total. And we started, as well as doing our own training, we sold forklift. If I put fork life training there, that's not what it is. Forklift truck training. We did driver CPCs for other bus operators, and actually for Preston City Council for the truck drivers. And we invested quite heavily in the early years in the fleet with a number of hybrids. We had some Optare Versa hybrids. I think we had 7 of those. We had some Volvo Wrights double deck hybrids also, which we kept for 7 years. And we modernised a number of the vehicles, and we updated the livery, painted every vehicle. And in Preston Bus, we won an enormous amount of awards for managing staff, leadership, for environmental savings, etc. But it was always about using Preston as a northwest centre to grow, and there was quite a lot of local authority owned bus companies in the northwest at that point, and I know there's still 1 or 2. So there was a hunger really to try and acquire one of those or get into North Manchester. So Tom, thank you. So entry into Manchester, like I say, was March 15, which is 8 years ago. We acquired South Lancs Travel, which was renamed Diamond Bus Northwest, and we acquired the shares in the company and obviously the assets that went with that, which included the Atherton depot and a number of vehicles. In the early days, it was about, as always, we needed to learn about the market, learn about the customers, because one thing I've learned in my life, they're different everywhere you go. Learn about the staff, because culturally, drivers, engineers behave differently in different parts of the UK. That's my opinion. But it was always about listening, learning, and obviously, in the earlier days, trying to deliver the expectations of TfGM, because they're quite stringent on lost mileage statistics, and the business was struggling in the earlier years. But we turned that around. We started to deliver quality of service. We had a bit of a pat on the back. It was a bit of a one. And then in September 17, I was always looking to find something else to go with it, because it was only tiny operator. Then we acquired the bus business of Goodwin's in Eccles, together with certain assets. So we bought his vehicles and one of his sites. Yeah, that wasn't somebody trying to say something, was it? Anyway, I'll carry on. So once again, it was about upgrading the vehicles, painting them, modernising vehicles where we could, and on we went. And once again, you know, improving delivery of performance. And at this time, we was then involved with, or I got involved with One Bus More, and we was talking about the future, and we was talking about the partnership model, which obviously is an option to franchising. And as operators, we did in collaboration with TfGM, we did a lot of work trying to, or putting together a partnership agreement, which we all felt would give better value to the public. So we, at the beginning, was this small operator coming in. If I'm totally honest, franchising looked really attractive at that point because it was one way we could grow and get more market share. But then all of a sudden, First Group wanted to divest of the three depots in Manchester. We made a bid for one or two, and we were successful with Bolton, and we bought Bolton in August 2019. So we then changed from being a smaller operation, I think it was something like we had about 22-23% of the market share then. And obviously Stagecoach had the bulk of it. So at that point, I mean, franchising looked like, well, we've struggled for a few years trying to get to this point now, and somebody wants to take it off us and do things a different way, which is just opinion, isn't it? When the decision came out, when the decision came out to franchise, we did contest the franchise. It is public knowledge. We took the legal route and we appealed, and we were not successful. So obviously the franchise mechanism went forward at that point. Thanks, Tom. So along came franchising. The mayor wanted it. Huge majority of the councillors wanted it, and there we were. So we were now. We actually contested it after this decision, but it all sort of rolls into one if we think about what's what. So all the work on the partnership went on. Well, it didn't go on the back burner. It probably went onto the burner, didn't it, and got burned. But anyway, sorry, I'd like to hand you over to Tom now. Tom's going to talk about the franchise process, because although we did contest it, we did desperately want to win back Bolton and win some other business. But it's just opinions. You know, one reason we live in the UK, you can have free speech, I think, unless you're Gary Lineker, although I think he's got away with it now, hasn't he? So we wanted to be in the marketplace, and we wanted to keep our Bolton depot having put a lot of passion and determination into it to turn it from what it was in terms of loss making and losing mileage into something we're proud of. So Tom, please carry on.
Okay, thanks a lot. Just as I think Bob introduced me, but I'll introduce myself. I'm Tom Caldermount, the commercial director of Diamond Bus, and I was responsible for our bid submissions for franchises in Manchester. So for the purposes of sort of rolling out franchising across the county, it was split up into three areas, which we refer to as tranches. So tranche one is the northwestern part of Greater Manchester, and franchising will start there in later this year. And there's the two Wigan and Bolton franchises, and a number of small franchises. In March 2024, franchising will commence in the northeast of the county. So this is Oldham and Rochdale and parts of Bury. And then in January 2025, franchising will commence in South Manchester, including Stockport, Ashton-under-Lyne, and Altrincham. Once franchising is introduced, the tranches will sort of drop away, and franchises will be retendered when they expire. So as I said before, there's two large franchises in tranche one, being Bolton and Wigan. So these are packages of routes that will come to a PVR of at least 35, and TfGM provide the depot to the successful operator to operate those services from. So, as I say, Bolton and Wigan in tranche one, there's 3 large franchises in tranche 2, and there's 5 large franchises in tranche 3. As I say, they include more than 35 PVR, and the depots are provided by TfGM. In addition to those, in each of the 3 areas, there's a small number of small franchises. So these have a PVR of fewer than 34 vehicles, and these are operated from the bidder's own depots. And in addition to those, there are school buses, which are franchised under a sort of separate school bus franchise arrangement, and there's a significant number of those, generally on a sort of one service, one franchise basis, which obviously drives the overall number of them. So in terms of our experience so far, in terms of tranche one, the process started all the way back in August 2021. The first stage that we had to go through was obtaining a passport to be able to continue bidding, and this was essentially a pre-qualification questionnaire to establish ourselves as a bidder. That was largely an administrative exercise, and was relatively easy to do. The second stage required us to express an interest in the franchise packages that had been put out for tender, and there's certain economic and financial standing requirements and technical requirements that bidders had to meet to be able to continue bidding. So things like financial standing, and certain pretty standard sort of rules around sort of public sector procurement. The process really kicked off in itself in April 2022, which is when we entered into quite an intensive period of negotiations with TfGM that lasted until September. So it was a negotiated process. So TfGM put out a proposed contract to all bidders, and it was up to bidders to go through that contract, and there was an opportunity to negotiate on certain aspects of that contract from our side. So a number of things were suggested, some of which were accepted and some of them weren't. Alongside the sort of negotiations, there was 6 meetings, each of which have a certain theme, and we sort of covered and discussed items in those. The bid submission itself was a lengthy document coming to 175 pages, which is split into 6 technical submissions and a financial submission. The first of the 6 submissions was around mobilisation. So we were asked to set out how we would successfully mobilise the services. How would we take over a fleet of vehicles from the outgoing operator? What is our approach to 2P? How would we enter into the depot, engage with outgoing operators and things like that? DP2, Delivery Plan 2, safety. This was sort of setting out our approach to health and safety and our safety management plans within the depot. And then DP3 was similar to that, but with a focus on the environment. So we were required to sort of set out our approach to environmental management, whether it's our approach to recycling or anything to do with the environment. We had to go into quite a lot of detail in that section. And we also had to make a social value proposition. So this is the value that sort of society benefits from us operating the franchise. So this is something that that was new to us, and we had to sort of do some research and put a lot of effort into putting together an attractive social value proposition. As an operator, primarily in the deregulated market, that's just something that doesn't generally happen. So as Bob said right at the very start, it was a learning experience for us. The final 3 delivery plans covering key assets, network delivery and franchise delivery were very much sort of bus operation focused. So key assets was around the ongoing management of the depots and the fleet, IT systems and on-bus systems. Network delivery was the sort of commercial and schedules aspects of the operation. So we were required to set out our approach to timetabling, driver scheduling, bus scheduling, rostering, interworking, and such like. Part of that included having to construct timetables for each of the sort of over 50 services that were involved. So we weren't given a timetable and asked to price it up, as would be the case in a normal bus tender. A specification was released, and we had to construct a timetable that met the requirements of that specification. We also had to be mindful of the proposed performance regime, where penalties and bonuses apply to the operator based on punctuality, lost mileage, complaints, and items such as that. So when constructing our timetables and schedules, we had to be aware of the sort of increased requirements in that area. Franchise delivery is the core, including staff management and training and such like. As I say, that all came to 175 pages. That was accompanied with a financial submission, which was rather complex, and that was submitted. So as I said earlier, that was all submitted in September of last year, and over the months following that, TfGM went through an evaluation process and evaluated all bids for quality and price, and the sort of scoring mechanism was based on a blend of quality and price. In late November 2022, we found out in confidence that our bids for 7 of the 9 small franchises had been successful, but we weren't successful in our bid for either of the 2 large franchises. So this was quite difficult for us because we knew what was going on, but that knowledge was sort of limited to a very small group of people, and we were sworn to secrecy until the 23rd of December, which is when the contract award was made and the announcement was made. That then takes us pretty much up to where we are today. So from January through to September of this year, we are officially in contract. So we are working under a contract to TfGM, albeit we don't actually operate any services until September. This is our mobilisation period, during which we prepare for the commencement of franchise services towards the end of September. So that's it from me, and I'll hand you back to Bob.
Tom, just before you move on, there was actually, was it a page limit or a word limit on the submission? I mean, it's like doing a university exercise, wasn't it?
It was a lot longer than the university exercises I did.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, in working within constraints, that's what I'm saying. The other thing that might be useful is if you just touch on the kind of feedback we got post the decision, post decision to award. So we got feedback on the delivery plans, didn't we? So everyone knows what the detail you get, yeah?
Yeah, so I mentioned a page limit of 175 pages, and that sounds like a lot, and to us it sounded like a lot, but TfGM set out in extensive detail what they expect to see in those 175 pages, and we had a hard time fitting it all in. So you've got to sort of be very concise in what you write. You don't have loads of space to sort of waffle on for pages and pages about how you sort of train up drivers, for instance. You've got to be very concise. But after the contracts were awarded, we were given very specific feedback from TfGM, as were all operators, and that allowed us to sort of analyse what went wrong, what we did well, and it was ultimately sort of a post-mortem as to why we weren't successful in any of the large franchises. So you get scored on a points basis between 0 and 5, by split up by the 6 delivery plans, and obviously we had plans where we scored higher than others. We had strong areas and weak areas, and that feedback sort of went into, as I say, an incredible amount of detail on our strengths and weaknesses. And that is the basis on which we've sort of moved forward into tranche 2.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So I think just for everybody's benefit, that feedback is invaluable because, for tranche 2 now, we can obviously reflect on that, learn from that, and hopefully get things in a better place. So following the decision to award the 7 small franchises to ourselves, that was late November 22, we then went through another phase of qualification where they had a list of things that we needed to go through again. So we won 7 small franchises. There were 9 out for tender. We tendered for all 9 because but the TfGM could only award a maximum of 7 to any one operator. So we assume that, rightly or wrongly, that the other 2 were awarded to someone subject to final qualification, and perhaps they didn't make it because they didn't award the other 2 franchises. And obviously we tendered for Wigan and also for the Bolton one, and it was like I say, really disappointing. We ended up with 7. We'd got a business in Manchester, and we had to dust ourselves down and realise we've got to go again. Think about tranche 2, tranche 3, think about the future, but we had to get on with it. And the announcement was official, with Tom and Matt there standing with the mayor. I mean, that was, I think, December the 23rd, 2 days before everybody's eating the turkey, and I guess people were wondering who were buying the turkey then in 2023, through the wages, etc. So a lot of uncertainty, not a good time of the year for it, but the time scale is such that they need 9 months from that notification to the start of the franchise, and I think it's 9 months to the day. And so
sorry, Bob, there's somebody on the line, isn't there? Let me just flick through to see if I can find out who that is. We'll try and mute them. Apologies for the break.
No.
Thank you very much indeed. Have a good evening. Right.
Okay, I think we're all right.
Okay, seems to be it. Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Okay, so we obviously got 2 angles to think of. Well, we got many angles, but it was under 2 headings really: demobilisation and mobilisation. We needed to think how we was going to transition out of Western Street and where we were going. And obviously one of the main things is staff, premises, where do we live? And at that point, we hadn't come to any agreement on Western Street. It was still ours. We needed to think about fleet, because one of the propositions is that you, Tom, put that spreadsheet up? Yeah. Fleet and any other assets we needed. So in terms of staff, we needed to think or understand how many staff we needed going forwards: drivers, admin, planning, management, engineers, cleaners, fuelers, and so on. How many did we need? We needed to seriously think about, could we retain those, or would there be a hunger to just transfer over under 2PID to go? Should we be selective about who we want to keep, and could we be selective? Because obviously we only had the Eccles depot at that point. So it's, will people travel from Bury to Eccles for a daily shift, or will they travel from Bolton to Eccles? And we have a lot of drivers still here and staff here that were previously first group Bury. So that's a consideration, and probably taking traffic into account, it's probably puts an hour on average every day on a working day. So we needed to think about that. So we needed to look about where do our routes operate, and the 7 franchises spread widely, whereas historically the Bolton network we inherited from first was all, well, it had been here a long time, and everybody knew the routes. And really, what's our selling point to drivers that we want to encourage to stay with us? You know, we want all the best drivers. We need about 220 of them. And how do we actually attract them to stay with us? So location of depots is a big thing in our view, vehicle fleet, I guess pay rates and so on. And it's how did we like, given on the 23rd of December, given we didn't know where the new home might be, because our Eccles depot in itself is not big enough for the new franchises. So we needed to communicate a message, come on, stay with us. We've got a reduced size business. We're going from about 300 vehicles down to 75. We're going from 600-700 employees down to less than 300. And it's like trying to put a positive spin on that and give people confidence isn't always easy. And the other thing is, my son Simon and I had been negotiating with TfGM about selling the Western Street site to them, because they'd actually awarded the franchise, and even today the site is ours. And what do we do with any other surplus assets? We need to plan vehicles, everything Euro 6, which most of them are anyway, but there's some of the stuff getting older. So it was about disposing of things and buying things. Many, many questions and many compromises to make, really. And it was like, how do we manage all these relationships? And it still is today to some degree, although today we do have more certainty today. We have agreed to buy the other depot from Goodwin's, which is a very modern depot in Eccles, which gives us 2 authorised test facilities where DVSA come and test vehicles on site. It's got modern workshop facilities, it's got some offices, and the plan is to build, we've got planning permission now to build a new office block on the Eccles site, and we want to spend some money and make it like take it to a higher level of modernisation, really. Once again, efficiency, but primarily attract staff. We've got to be an attractive employer that people want to work for, that see a future in what we're doing. So quite a few challenges on the demobilisation. The other thing is, how do we manage the relationship with the incoming operator? Because that can be a little bit sensitive if you think somebody wants to pinch your stuff off you. I don't know whether they do, but if they do, we just want to keep them at arm's length if we can. But on the other hand, we don't want to be an obstruction in the way, because, we want a good relationship with whoever we can, as long as there's mutual respect involved with it. So in terms of premises, we are determined to obtain an operating centre in or around Bolton, which I think we should have that deal put together in the next 7 to 14 days. And the idea there is the drivers, well, the lost mileage, because there's some of the routes, I say the routes are widespread, and it would suit to have a depot in Bolton for staff and also for the mileage implications of operating the 7 franchises. So we are confident we're going to get this depot in Bolton. And another thing we've done is we've just bought a big building in the centre of Bolton, which we're going to make into the 2 things it's going to do. It's going to be an admin centre downstairs, which takes care of the service planning with statistical stuff, the stuff that's not operationally based. It's a very nice building, very old. We need to spend some money on it, but it will be a lovely place to work. And upstairs, we're going to make it into living accommodation for 6 people. And the reason we're doing that is because in Bolton, we train staff from, train drivers from Heathrow and the Birmingham depots. And at the moment, we're spending a fortune on accommodation for drivers. So upstairs, 6 bedrooms, downstairs, administration, and that's within 3-4 minutes walk of Bolton interchange. So that's in terms of those premises. In terms of mobilisation, so like I keep saying about staff, engineers, drivers, cleaners, anyone, we just need the right people. We need people that's attuned or committed to deliver standards that we need to deliver under franchising. Because if we don't deliver the standards, we're going to get heavily penalised financially, and we're not going to be very well placed when we're holding our hand out and saying, can you give us this big franchise that we've just tendered for, are we? So we need to deliver. And it's not just that, it's the pride element. Pride plays a big part in what we do. And we need to do the job to the highest standards. You know, our vision is to be the preferred operator in Manchester. When TfGM wants something, we want to be the ones that they want to use, you know. So can we move on, please, Tom? Thank you. So like I say, staff, I keep talking about staff. Premises, I'm happy we're on track with all the premises now. We keep talking to staff and we say, we're going to do this, we're going to this. And some of the stages we have delivered. There's just 1 or 2 pieces missing out of the jigsaw. In terms of fleet, we've really struggled because all manufacturers, certainly in the UK, there seems to be this lag where over COVID, there's been a lack of investment in fleets. And what that's meant is there's now a pent-up demand to build more buses. So, and linked alongside that, we've got a double whammy because we've almost got a perfect storm, because somebody like ADL told me that they've reduced output, I think it was 2,400 vehicles a year to 1,200. So they reduced the staff, and and there's a challenge getting production up again, because it's not just getting the skills, although that is obviously a big thing, but it's the whole supply chain in terms of probably door gears and glass and electrical components or whatever else they need to buy. So there's a challenge there. So we believe we've done a deal with Volvo to buy 60 new single deck buses for the contracts. But we just need to firm up a few things on that. So in terms of other assets, there's bits and bobs, but in terms of what we need to do, we need to firm up this whole idea of vision and the strategy, exact strategy, how we're going to deliver. As Tom's told you, we're bound contractually by 6 delivery plans. You know, we need to do those, and we need to have everyone in place. And we've got probably draft 19 of a structure that we believe can deliver it now. So the structure is a crucial thing, getting people accountable for certain elements of the operation. And we're going to be on street monitoring, we're going to be monitoring in bus stations, we're going to be monitoring at the desk, we're going to be And we're going to be encouraging drivers to really work with us. It's so essential we engage all the staff with performance, really. And like I say, the quality standards under franchising just goes to a much demanding level, you know. I mean, Tom can talk to you about some of the fining element, like the fines we can get for a driver, if anybody wants to ask the question. But you know, we can soon lose a lot of money. So the current, out of 7 franchises, the current operators include Diamond Bus Northwest. We operate some of the routes at the moment, the Vision, Travel, Arriva and Tyrers. The only staff we're aware of that are potentially going to be 2P'd over are 50 drivers from Vision. So hopefully we can bring them on board when the time's right. I think that's the end of the slides, Tom, is it? Oh no, we've got another one. Okay, so Tom's already mentioned tranche 2 is well underway. The delivery plans are coming underway. Where we've got weaknesses in some of the previous delivery plans, we've engaged, Tom, is it 2 lots of consultants we've engaged for different ones?
Yeah.
To just try and sharpen the pencil and just head us in the right direction. It is probably, it's a skill that we probably had very little knowledge or skill of at the beginning of tranche 1. But like I say, we're learning as we go, and these people are well, they are helping us fine tune the stuff for tranche 2. We are very optimistic. We can grow the market share, but we've got to deliver the level of service. You know, there's no 2 ways about it. We cannot accept anything better than everyday greatness, as we say. But learning is a key thing. We're all learning all the time. I'm old now and I'm still learning, so I'm sure everybody else can embrace it now. Franchising, it's a new thing to me. I don't think we've actually anybody in the management team that has been involved with a franchise operation. I worked a short time in Gdynia in Poland. We had 1 bus on a franchise there. That's my extent of my understanding of it. But we're determined people, we're passionate, we put everything into it, and believe me, we're going to get there, and we will not be happy until we're delivering exactly what we should be delivering. Quality bus services. That's what we need to deliver, and we need to have a team of people where it's never going to get 100%, but a huge majority are engaged with the vision and the journey we're on. Okay, Tom, last slide, please. Questions, please. Go easy on us though, please, will you? Okay,
Bob. Tom, thanks very much for that. I think there's a lot of sympathy from the rest of the industry in what you're going through. I'm sure that's there's 1 or 2 people nodding there. Of course, the first tranche is always going to be the most difficult, and that will set the scene presumably for further tranches both in Manchester and maybe somewhere else in the north. It seems to me that the northern mayors are banding together almost to say this is the way to go. Odd that they've forgotten there's other mayors about, but it seems to be the north going on its own way. Right, so we can open up questions, gentlemen. As I said earlier on, remain muted. If you put your go on your toolbar and look at reactions, you will find there a little hand you can raise, and if you do that, we'll have a really orderly question session, I'm sure. So we've already got, yeah, superb. Lewis Richards, go ahead, please.
Really interesting as always. What the West Midlands Diamond Bus will go into franchise, or will that be too early to say?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, please, if you don't mind.
Oh lordy, no, it's interesting, isn't it? There's two ways of doing it. There's probably more ways actually, but there's certainly 2 on offer. We've heard Bob's way. My understanding, and I'm not totally connected anymore to National Express and TfWM, but it's quite clear to me that the mayor favours the partnership approach. So it'd be really, really fascinating to see how those two develop in parallel. And Bob's lucky because he's involved in both, so it'll be interesting to see that. Until the combined authority of West Midlands decides that franchising is go, and at the moment they're looking at it, but they're certainly not progressing it with any strength. Until that happens, then the status quo will be the current commercial situation in West Midlands. Anything to add to that, Bob?
No, really. I don't know whether the question was, if it was franchise, would we be interested in participating? Was that the question, or was it?
Ah, okay. Lewis.
Yeah, it was actually.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Good.
I'm pretty sure if there's business around and we're in that market at that time, or even if there's business around and we can enter the market, we will certainly be interested in entering under a franchise or any other scheme.
Yeah,
Oh, interesting. Thank you very much.
as I expected, of course. David, your hand's up.
Yes, mine is. That's a sort of engineering question, really. With the cost of electric buses and the enormous cost of getting rid of them later, do you see a future at all for hydrogen, or do you think it will have to be electric?
Okay, I think hydrogen, the problem is, a hydrogen bus is far more expensive than an electric bus. An electric bus is twice the price of a diesel bus. So it makes you wonder where it's all going. I suppose my thoughts are, if you've got vehicles doing that need the range, doing more mileage, then you need to consider something other than an electric bus. So the big advantage to me with hydrogen, as well as probably the political aspirations of some local authorities, is the range. But I think on the counter side of that is they're more complicated, they're more expensive, and it brings you a whole new challenge in terms of fueling and so on. So personally, I don't see them coming into urban operation, surely, not as a mass entry thing, but who knows?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's certainly, some manufacturers are pushing hydrogen more than others, aren't they? And I think for a truck, it's a different scenario, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Bob. Richard Delahoy.
Thanks very much, Bob and Tom, for a fascinating presentation. I certainly don't envy you the challenges that you've got facing you. Seems to me that one of the key changes is the move from who takes the commercial risk, who takes the revenue risk. That at the moment, that's you and the commercial operators. But in future, I wonder if the councillors who've signed up to franchising realise that it's their bodies, the councils, who are actually going to take that risk. I don't know whether you can comment on that, and whether in the contracts that you've got, is there any provision for TfGM to come back to you and say, in a year, in 2 years' time, we can't afford what we're buying or what we have been buying from you and what we're committed to. We want to reduce, or we want to renegotiate.
Okay, crikey. Yeah, that's a frightening thought, isn't it, after we bought these new buses? Yeah. Okay. So I'm a lawyer, but I don't believe there's any way they could break the contract once they've entered into it. And what you've got to think is some of the contracts are for 3 years, some for 5 years. And I'm not sure about the larger ones. Are they for 7 years, Tom?
So they are for 5 years, but they've got 2 annual extensions that can be exercised, so it could go up to 7.
But I would thought it's highly unlikely. But I mean, if you think about ourselves contesting the franchise model, I mean, a lot of it was around the economics of it, but obviously that got turned around. I think it's politics, probably. So politicians want franchising, perhaps more so in Manchester than anywhere at the moment, and they're doing it, and it's going to happen. So really, I can't really comment more than that, to be honest.
Understood,
Okay.
Bob. Yeah, understand.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Anthony D, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Bob. That was a very entertaining presentation. You've obviously had to deregister some services in advance of the franchise opening. Why have you done that?
We're not happy with the level of service we're delivering at the moment, if I'm totally honest. We need to get the business in a situation where we're operating now like we're under franchise. So we think make the business a little bit smaller at the moment, take the pressure off some stuff. We need to repaint a lot of vehicles as well. So we need space because we need to paint a lot of vehicles yellow, like probably 6 a week. So that's taking 6 vehicles out all the time. And it's no good getting to September the 22nd or whatever, and then on the 23rd we've got to operate everything 100%. We need to be doing it now, and that is one of the key driving factors. Plus, it's not a secret that many transport operators have found it very difficult to get enough drivers. So yeah, all these sort of elements have fed into the decision, really. Does that make sense?
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
But to be honest, with the driver situation now, touch wood, it is easing, and we are making a lot of progress now.
I mean, it just makes you wonder what Go are going to do, doesn't it? Actually.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but no, you can't comment on that.
Well, I don't know what they're going to do. No.
Okay, Bob. Difficult. Steve, please.
Yeah, my question. I have the pleasure of working with Bob in Preston. It is a very big pleasure to work with him, and we've sat and shared some stories. And I just wondered if Bob would like to share one of his happiest memories in the bus industry in his career.
Crikey, what's a... You wait till I see you again now, fella. You're going to get a size 10 up the backside. So one of the happiest memories. I've got a lot, to be honest. You've not read my book. Okay, I suppose, you know, many years ago at Dunn, we grew a business on a mix of contracts, private hire, and really predictable income streams. And one big mistake I made was I then entered London with a huge amount of resource, drivers and vehicles, and nearly lost it all. I nearly lost it all because 2001 came and 9/11 and all the tourists stopped coming to London. And I was, the long-term strategy in London was to really get a TfL contract and really balance the work out. So we had bus work and coach work with incoming tourists. So after 9/11, there was like, we had probably 40 vehicles and 80 staff with no work, and all the vehicles were new because they needed to be in London and we needed to get out of trouble. It then took 3 years of heavy losses of family business money, millions and millions of pounds. But eventually we got through it with the help of the family, and eventually we floated on the AIM market and were successful. And that is probably the happiest time of my life, because everyone's saying, you'll never make it, you'll never do it, you're going to fail. Even the bank manager says, if you succeed, I'll eat my hat. So eventually, after the flotation, I got a hat made, and a cake made in the shape of a hat. I says, there you are. Eat that now. So that's probably, is it the moment of most relief? I'm going to get you for that one.
Thanks, Bob. Don't do it on air though, please. Yeah, I can see how you feel.
I will be in for a size 10.
Thanks, Steve. Hope to see you around. Cheers. Don, next question, please.
An excellent presentation, Bob and Tom. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. 2 semi-related questions. One, are you beginning to see staff leaving at the point now? Are you starting to lose staff who are going to join other things because of they can see your business is going to be a much smaller business in 6 months' time?
Okay, we have lost 1 or 2 members of staff. Anything like the number I would thought we would do, to be honest. So we're pleasantly surprised on that at the moment. Let's just hope it stays that way. I'm just hoping and praying and believing, and I do believe once we've got a clear strategy on premises and some other bits and bobs, we can get that message out and people know they can still work in Bolton, for example, or they can work in Eccles. And so this is about, once we get the premises, we can sort out the schedules where everything operates from, and we can then specify we need 100 drivers here, we need another 80 there and 50 there, for example, you know. So the answer to the question is no, not to the extent what I thought we might do.
On the vehicle side, you've obviously ordered these 60 new Volvos for presumably to be delivered before September.
That's a good question. So I don't think they will be delivered for the start date, but they will be delivered very soon afterwards.
So that follows on. I was intrigued that you're going to be painting, you know, a chunk of your existing fleet in Bolton yellow. Is that because they're going to be redeployed to another successful franchise who's won the franchise in Wigan and Bolton?
We're painting the buses for TfGM.
Right. So they're probably going to another operator.
Yeah, almost certainly.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Thank you. Steve Sellers. Unmute.
Thanks,
Steve.
Jeff. Thanks for
Hi.
a fascinating presentation this evening. In terms, it's obviously very disappointing for you, Bob, not to have won one of the large franchises in that first round, and you were keen to bid for the future tranches coming up. Do you feel there's perhaps a maximum size, though, of the number that you could successfully run if you were successful in, say, all the remaining large franchises? Would that make the business too big to be manageable in your view?
Oh dear. I mean, would that question apply to any bus operator or just us?
No, I would apply. No, certainly it doesn't. Not meant that way. It does apply to anybody. Do you think there's a natural size that it becomes almost unmanageable if you're beyond that?
I think that can possibly happen in any business, but it's how well you can get your senior team or your management team together, and you can grow that team, isn't it? And that's about, can you engender the right culture? Can you get people believing in your way? Do we have the same principles? And it's always difficult to get people to fit. And that's the big thing when we recruit anybody. It's not necessarily are they the finished item, but will they fit? Have they got the passion that we've got for it? Have they got the commitment? Because if they have, you know, in my opinion, 8, 9 times out of 10, you can then develop those skills in people. So I think I'd like to think there's no limit. Is there really a limit? The limit is the people. And at the moment, if I'm totally honest, which I always try to be, there is a serious problem with, I don't know whether work ethics change, whether loyalties changed. I don't know if it's post-COVID. I don't know if it's like just something that's certainly something that's happened in my long life in this sector, 53 years of it. I've seen so much change in terms of the attitude of engineers, and not just engineers. And not all engineers, it's not all, but it's like before, the majority of people is attention to detail, pride. It was, you know, do a job properly. And so that is the limiting factor, Steve, in my opinion. It's how well you can coach or bind those people together with your passion and your vision for what you're doing. So the sky's the limit, but you've got a lot of challenges on the way. That's what I'm saying. And I'd like to think there is no limit, but it's a difficult journey. Difficult.
Sure.
I hope that wasn't just waffle for nothing, but that's how I feel about it, you know.
That's a good answer. No, thank you.
Okay, Steve. I mean, as a rider to that, Bob, TfGM presumably have put some ceiling on individual operators' involvement. You know, could it be that Go Ahead could win the whole lot? Is that, or is that prevented?
Actually, Tom's had a conversation with them on that. So, haven't you, Tom? Can you just answer that?
Yeah. So when the bidding for tranche 2 first started, they were looking at putting a limit on the number of large franchises that any one operator can have. So those limits already exist in terms of the smalls. So as Bob said before, there was 9 small franchises in tranche 1. We were awarded 7. And if it wasn't for that limit, the chances are we would have been awarded all 9. So they are sort of actively looking at doing something similar for the large franchises. But as it stands, there's nothing in place. So in theory, somebody could have all 10 large franchises at the same time.
Wow. Okay, thanks for that. It's interesting. Can I just add, is there a queue? Anybody know? Can I just add one of mine? Going back to the beginning of the process, which you described there, when TfGM, as it were, came out with the blueprint, the timetables and so on, was there any scope for the individual bidders to look at timetables, possibly alter routes, alter anything, in fact? My impression was that there wasn't, but which sounds pretty awful to me, but surely the operator has got a lot of experience in how things tick on the road. And that presumably was ignored by TfGM, was it?
Tom, you pick that one up, please, because you had the meetings, didn't you?
Yeah, so in terms of the network, in terms of routes, they are set by TfGM, and there's no scope for those to be changed or alternatives proposed by bidders. However, in terms of the timetables, because the successful bidder is going to sort of attract penalties or bonuses based on levels of service performance in terms of punctuality, start point punctuality, excess waiting times, etc. It's up to the operator to actually submit a proposed timetable. So they sort of said, we want a service from point A to point B every 10 minutes between 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock at night. And then it's over to us to construct timetables within those parameters. So that is the extent of it. That's not to say so we couldn't submit sort of alternative proposals. However, it was a negotiated procedure. So if at the bidding stage we had an idea on how something could be done better, then it was raised through that process, and some of those proposals were sort of absorbed into what we've got now. Some of them weren't. I mean, an example of what we did. One of the small franchises is focused on local town services around Leigh, and we operate the majority of those at the moment as tendered services on behalf of TfGM, and we're aware of punctuality problems with those services. So we address those problems as part of our proposed timetables. We proposed using I think 12 buses instead of 10 buses that are used today, and that was just to sort of facilitate all the extra time. So there is a small amount of scope to be able to do your own thing, but it is limited, and I think that goes back to the whole sort of premise of franchising generally. Those functions, sort of commercial functions, transfer from ourselves to TfGM.
Yeah. Okay, Thomas. They know best, of course. Oops, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Jeff Cross, welcome, Jeff. Your question.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, thanks, Bob and Tom. Really enjoyed that presentation. Just 2 questions on the franchising process. As a former small operator myself, I was quite intrigued with what you referred to as a questionnaire, it was obvious as the presentation went on, it was far more detailed than that. Would you say franchising is the end for small operators? Is it actually a small 30, 40, 50 vehicle operator to win a package? And then on the second question, particularly on the large tranches, if an incumbent operator doesn't want to sell their premises, then what's the backstop option? Not necessarily this tranche, but future tranches.
So I can have a go at the first one, and Bob might want to have a go at the second. So in terms of the small franchises, I probably should have made it clear in the presentation. The requirements for bidding for those are significantly simpler than bidding for the large franchises. So the large franchises was, as I said before, about 175 pages spread over 6 plans. The small franchises were around 40 pages spread over 4 plans. So is it impossible for a small franchised operator to win is it impossible for a small operator to win a small franchise? I would say it's certainly possible, but I'm not a small operator, and I haven't been, but that's just my personal view. I think the requirements of the sort of bidding for the small franchises were relatively straightforward. It was nowhere near as complex as the large franchises, and I suppose whilst there's a requirement to sort of try to engage smaller operators in the process, they also want to award the contracts to the person who's going to run them the best, and that might not always be a small operator. So as with anything, there's a balance to be found. I'll say that some of that's my personal view, not necessarily reflective of the company's view.
Jeff, I think I started with 9 coaches at one time, so I know what it's like to literally do everything. So, and it's difficult when you're trying to do everything yourself, and in something like that, you've got to get it right, because once again, when you're working like that, it's hard to trust people as well, isn't it? You know, so you've got all those dilemmas. So I suppose if I was a small operator, I wanted to get into the franchise market, I would probably find a good consultant to engage to support me. And it's like Tom says, it's less complex for the smaller ones than the larger ones. So, I mean, I would hate to think they put in a barrier to entry there for small operators, because sometimes small operators operate stuff far better than larger operators. I mean, Tom's just said they might not, but on the other hand, I know that a lot could. So, and it's a shame if they are excluded. In terms of the premises, I'm not sure, but I think there's some sort of compulsory purchase route they can go down if they need to. I mean, we just want to, or we still want to sell Western Street, so it suits us, I suppose, because it's a big site. What would we do with it otherwise? But some of the sites, I mean, we've probably got one of the biggest sites, Tom, have we?
I think Bolton is the biggest.
Yeah, so I mean, Middleton's not massive, is it? And there are some smaller ones. So I don't really know. I don't know, to be honest. But it's surprising that, you know, they award the franchise. They say they're going to use Bolton, and they've not even bought it yet. But...
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I suppose, talking to Jeff, really, the economies of scale are what you're worrying about, and I was quite surprised that the TfGM allowed 7 out of the 9 small franchises to be with one operator. I thought that perhaps if they reduced that to 2 or something, the chances of small operators coming in would have been better. Any comment on that, Bob or Thomas?
I think for us, if we'd have been left with 2 small franchises and 18 buses, I don't really think we'd be putting much commitment into it, would we? I think, you know, at least we've got 71 PVR, and it's a worthwhile exercise. So it's like Tom says, it's a balance again, isn't it? It's a balance. You need to get small operators. But there was two franchise small ones not awarded. So a smaller operator could have picked those up. I mean, what was it, Tom? 5, 6 buses for the 2. It's not a large amount, was it?
No.
And it could have probably been a good entry point for somebody that runs 20 buses or 30 buses, you know.
Sure, sure. Without delving too deeply, why weren't they awarded?
Sorry?
Why weren't those two awarded? I mean, presumably Rotala, sorry, Diamond will pick them up, but were there no bids from anybody else?
We don't know that, do we, Tom?
I don't know yet, no.
I don't know the answer. But I think, have they been integrated with the Wigan franchise, Tom, now?
Yeah, so they are part of the large Wigan franchise.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Right, I've got somebody you know now. Gary Nolan, next on. Unmute.
Really comments rather than questions. Just on that last point, I understand that the two small franchises have been attached to the Wigan operation. And the original plan was that no large franchise depot could be used to operate smaller franchises.
That's true.
But it just seems perverse that you've been capped at 7 small franchises because that's the rules. But when it comes to not allocating small franchises to large franchise depots, the rules go out the window. Maybe that's because nobody bid for them. Just on network, TfGM have openly said that the franchise, the specifications for the franchises are as per now, because they don't want to change any of the network until all of the franchises have been awarded and they've had the opportunity to get data that belongs to them rather than data from the operators before they make any decisions on what the network's going to look like. The third thing that I wanted to raise was, I think we talked about this earlier on, and anybody who reads Buses magazine will see Julian Peddle has done a fantastic article, which refers to the experience and knowledge of existing operators has been totally ignored. And it's back to Jeff's point about they know best. And I think they've missed a trick there because, okay, I suppose their view is we've done negotiations with operators and therefore they've had the opportunity to put their experience in. But all throughout this, it's always been TfGM leading the pack rather than involving anybody else along with it. One question, I suppose, from experience, Bob, Tom, yeah, a fantastic presentation. You're spot on with all what you've said. Do you think having a London-style operation would have been better doing it as a London-style operation and having route contracts rather than depot-based contracts? Because then it might take longer to get them all in place, but they are much smaller contracts that can be done a lot quicker, rather than having this tranche 1 being up and running, whilst tranche 2's bids are being analysed. It's as though they're not going to learn any lessons from tranche 1 before they award tranche 2. And tranche 3 will be similar. That'll be bidded for before, whilst one's settling. Do you think there would have been merit in doing it London style by route? And I suppose the argument there is there's not that many big routes, but I suppose there are. Or do you think they've done the right thing by going down depots?
Okay. I don't, you know, when London first started operating the way it does, Gary, how was it done there at the beginning?
I think it was districts, wasn't it? With London Forest and
I think so, yeah.
Abbey and Cardinal, there were these sort of districts.
To be honest with you, I've never really thought of it by route. I suppose they just wanted to, like you say, get it in. Big thing, big exposure, big risk, and I don't know. What do you think, Tom? Do you think it'd been better by route?
I think the benefits for maybe new entrant operators is that the barriers to entry are a lot low. a lot lower. I think that's why it's happened. But just on the point about the overlap, Gary, I think initially the intention was that there was going to be a 12-month gap between the commencement of franchising in each tranche, and maybe we've only got ourselves to blame, but tranche 1 got delayed because of the judicial review, and they still want to do tranche 3 at the original date, so it's all bunched up a bit.
Yeah, you're right, Tom.
So that's our fault then, Tom.
I'm sure someone will blame it on us.
So, yeah, and I mean, the other thing is, Gary, just going back to your point, I mean, they could have probably tried a small depot first. Perhaps that would have been a better way. I mean, with Bolton, I think Bolton it's the biggest operational depot, isn't it, on the franchise plan, Tom?
Yeah, by I think quite a long way.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're starting with probably one of the more difficult ones. I don't know. I think so. They could have started with a Middleton or something, I guess, and just done that one. It's interesting thought, Gary. I've never really give it any thought, but yeah, it is an interesting point. I'm sure there'd be loads of people disagree with you if you ask the question in certain places, but
I'm just thinking of when they get to tranche 3 and there's 5 big ones in there.
yeah, there is.
That's right. That could be an interesting time then, and with Stagecoach much more involved than they currently are, of course. Interesting. Okay, sorry, Jeff Cook, come in, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bob and Tom. Partly, I think my question has partly been answered in the comments you made to Gary. It was about whether the service network, the timetables are sort of set in stone for the next however many years, or whether there's scope either to by negotiation or otherwise, or for them to be changed in the oncoming years for either increased or decreased. I mean, is there anything within the within the system?
So there's provisions within the contracts to change the contracts. So the schedules in terms of the routes and the timetables form part of the core contract, but there is a change mechanism in the contract. So either party can propose a change, and that is either accepted or rejected by the other side. So TfGM could say, we want you to start running this hourly service every half an hour or every 2 hours. You know, I think there's a balance to be struck between a stable network, but you also want a network that can respond to changes in the market. And an example of that is we've got Logistics North near Bolton, which is a huge employment area. And 10 years ago, it was just wasteland. It was an old colliery, I think. And it's now Aldi and Amazon. And we run services there. Sort of as early as 3 in the morning to sort of 1 o'clock in the morning. It's almost a 24-hour service, and that's key to sort of keeping up with changes in the market. But it's, I think from TfGM's side, it's about this sort of value stability. But as I say, we've got to recognise that times change, and you know, traffic conditions, traffic gets worse each year, and you've got to. We call them congestion matching timetables. You've got to update them every now and again when traffic congestion gets worse. So yes, there is provision for that in the contracts.
Thanks, Tom. The mayor's in charge of traffic too, isn't he? I thought he was anyway, which might help. Don, you're coming back.
He's not.
He's not?
No.
Okay.
No, he's made it abundantly clear that he wants the districts to make sure that they aren't impeding buses in the future.
Very
Why
neat.
he's not asking him to do that now, I don't know, but in the future he's making it quite clear that the districts, he doesn't want any delays for buses.
Good. Master stroke, absolutely brilliant. Right, Don, come in again.
Can I ask what you know about the franchise for school transport?
Okay. Well, we've certainly tendered for a lot of school routes. When's the decision date in April, Tom, is it, for that?
Yeah, so within each tranche, there's, well, between 20 and 30 or 40 or more school bus franchises, which have sort of very much been run similar to how they are today, but updated to go into the sort of franchise market. So we have submitted some bids for school franchises in the tranche 1 area, and we're expecting the result of that imminently. But they are being sort of let in a very similar way to how they are now.
And are those, Tom, longer contracts than they are now in terms of how long the contract runs? Because some, I don't know about Manchester, but some authorities have gone down to awarding contracts for school work on a 12-month basis.
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment we run very, very few school bus contracts in Manchester. So I'm not completely up to date with the detail, but yeah, I think at the moment they're awarding 12-month contracts. I think once we go into franchised school bus contracts, I think they are for 3 years. I'm not 100% sure on the accuracy of that statement, but I think they're for about 3 years. But there are also some school routes that are in the main franchise packages as well. So within the 7 small franchises that we've won, there's 4 school bus services in there as well, and they will be operated as any other franchise service. So they'll have the branded vehicles with all the next stop announcements and all the rest of it. And then there'll be the sort of school bus franchises, which will be in the sort of operator's own livery, I think with some kind of exterior sticker or something like that on there. So there's sort of two strands of schools really. There's those that sit inside the main franchises and those that are sort of school bus franchises in their own right, and the operating requirements of those are slightly different.
Okay, Tom, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Chris, we'd like to come in. Unmute. You've got to unmute.
Yes, that's better. Sorry.
Okay.
On the question of whether you have to change services with congestion, I have a nephew who works for Transport for London in traffic management. And on some of the bus routes in London, they've changed the timings on the traffic lights to improve the efficiency of the buses. Is there any provision for this in Manchester?
So we already have that on some of our services. So historically, I think traffic light priority, it was you had to sort of fit a transponder to the bus, and the transponder sort of spoke to the traffic light junction, you know, when it was a couple of seconds away from reaching the stop line, and then the lights had changed to green. And how it works now is there's a link between the ticket machine and the central traffic light control system, and the later the bus is running, the higher the level of priority it gets at the lights. So we've had that in place for about 12 months now, and it's been interesting to sort of see the impact it's had. It's not had a huge impact, but it certainly makes the journey times more reliable. So if the bus is running very late, then it'll get lots of priority, and the idea is it gets back on track. And as far as I'm aware, that will continue under franchising, and that is available at a lot of traffic light junctions. The challenge is that they've got the system has got to be sort of manually set up at each traffic light junction, and that is a very labour intensive thing to do. So it's mainly been targeted on the sort of key key routes in and out of Manchester where you get a lot of services going through the same junction, so that you maximise the benefits of doing it. And as I say, as far as I'm aware, that's going to continue, and it's something that, you know, we're strongly in favour of, and we put a lot of pressure on TfGM to continue doing it.
Good. Thanks, Thomas.
Yes, thank you for that.
John Hardy, please.
Long have operators got to make sure that all the vehicles that they're using on the franchise services are painted in the yellow livery and comply with the other conditions, such as next stop announcements and things like that? And I'm assuming that the franchises are going to be operated by a mixture of the new vehicles acquired by TfGM and vehicles from the operator's existing fleet. And part of the next question has been partly answered by Tom's previous comments about the school buses, which their contracts, it seems, can be operated by operators' own liveried vehicles with some sort of sticker or recognition on the vehicle.
Okay, what's the period of time, Tom, for the changes to the vehicles?
So obviously any new vehicles that are delivered will be delivered in the correct livery. Any older vehicles that are transferring into franchising, they'll need to have an interim livery applied at handover. So that'll be sort of stickers on the outside of buses covering over the logos, etc. But there is a requirement for them to be fully branded within 2 years of commencement, and that time limit also applies to the enhancements. So this includes things like retrimming the seats into the B network maquette, and fitting of next stop announcements, and such like. In terms of our operation, as Bob said, we've got 60 vehicles coming from Volvo. They'll be in the B network livery, and our intention is that the additional vehicles that'll supplement those will also be painted ahead of commencement. So we are aiming for a 100% branded depot on the fleet on the services pretty shortly after commencement.
Yeah, I think one challenge has been, when we've been looking at new vehicles, is actually facilitating 2 wheelchair places, which is one of the that modification is going to be done to all existing vehicles, Tom, as well, and
yeah, that's right.
but so we've had to buy longer Volvos rather than a little bit shorter ones to fit in the wheelchairs. So there's some sort of challenging bits associated with the modifications. 2 years seems a long time, but that's, yeah, I thought it was 2 years.
I think probably the bit to add to that as well is you can't rebrand the vehicle without doing the enhancements. So the idea is that if the bus is yellow, that means it's part of the B network, and therefore it has to have the interior enhancements. So you can't do one without the other. And as Bob said, that involves an extra wheelchair bay, and then you go into the realms of COIF and all the rest of it, and it's not a simple thing to do. It can be quite a big piece of work, especially across a large fleet.
Okay, Tom. I think I can take one last question, which the privilege goes to you, Paul. Speak from afar.
Well, yes, hello from Canada, and thank you to Bob and Tom for a very interesting presentation. My question is, what happens to the bus services coming from outside of the Greater Manchester area? So you've got a bus route coming in from a community outside of Manchester. Will that have to terminate at the boundary and passengers transfer to a yellow bus? Or will those bus services continue into the centre of Manchester or a community?
So I'm very relieved to say that we don't operate any cross-boundary services. My understanding of the position is it's based on the depot that the service runs from. So if the service is a cross-boundary service that's operated from a depot inside Greater Manchester, then it will be a franchise service. So for instance, the 362, which runs from Wigan to Chorley, that service will be a franchise service from Wigan to Chorley in the Wigan franchise. If it's a service from outside of Greater Manchester, from a depot outside Manchester running into the county, then it will be granted a permit, and they'll very much sort of continue as they do today. So something like the 125 from Preston to Bolton, that's run from a depot in Chorley, that will sort of just continue running in very much the same way as it does today. However, I'm not particularly close to the detail because we don't run any cross-boundary services. I've not really been involved with it, but that's my understanding of the position.
Okay, thank you very much.
I suppose ultimately, Tom, they could not issue a permit. Is that possible?
I don't know whether it's possible, but it sounds like a risk. Yeah.
I'm thinking of some of the ones that come in from what's it called, the Whichway and things like that, from up in Blackburn and Burnley. Presumably they could be prevented from picking up and setting down in Greater Manchester and still have a permit.
Yeah. I think a lot of it depends on how it interacts with the franchise network, and I mean certainly the 125 into Bolton, it doesn't really overlap any franchise services, so it would make sense to issue a permit for it. But I'm not TfGM.
Yeah, you're lucky you're not TfGM, I think, by the sound of some of this. Sorry, lads, it's time to draw it to a close. The hour is approaching when we said we'd shut down, and we've probably exhausted poor Thomas and Bob anyway. I think we should extend our thanks and a certain amount of sympathy, I think, from industry colleagues to what they're going through. Thanks in particular for a very open revelation of what went on and how they see things. I didn't think I wasn't expecting that, and I'm very grateful that they've opened up in that sense to explain things to us. I think we owe a round of applause to the two gentlemen, please, if you wouldn't mind. Really good. Thank you, Bob, again. On behalf of the Midland branch, then, I'm closing things up by saying, hope you all enjoyed the speaker evening. We're going to continue with these in October, and all the details will be on the OS website. So, in conclusion, renewed thanks to Bob and to Tom, and thank you so much for your interest. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.
All the best. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Right.